I think that the question that we need to be asking is, why are we having sex?
Men need to have sex to feel loved, and women need to feel loved to have sex.
Relationships fail because of unrealistic and unexpressed expectations. You need to find your soulmate and your twin flame or your whatever, and they're going to meet all of your needs, and you're going to be attracted to them all of the time.
I see polyamory becoming more and more popular.
Marry for love, modern day monogamous relationship is really not working. Non-monogamy is really an umbrella term, and under non-monogamy is different spokes. And polyamory is one of them. Swinging is one of them.
Advice for those who want to communicate their desires to their partner, but they don't know how or they're scared.
I was willing to lose my marriage because I knew that I had to be authentic to who I was.
At what point, if any, can a relationship no longer be revived?
Just because a relationship ends doesn't mean it failed.
BDSM. It's gotten a lot of attention since 50 Shades of Grey.
Yes.
And welcome to my guest, Courtney Boyer, to the podcast. I'm really excited to have you here. We're going to get into some really fun relationship and sex stuff today that I haven't really explored on the podcast yet. So I'm very excited about this. Courtney, do you mind sharing a little bit about who you are and what it is that you do?
Yes. So first, thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be here. My name is Courtney Boyer. I am a relationship and sexuality expert. I'm a clinically trained mental health and sex therapist turned life coach turned entrepreneur, expert, writer, lots of different things that I do. And so I work predominantly with women and helping them to really prioritize pleasure in their life so that they can become more aligned with their purpose.
I see that your book is in the background. So
It is.
Let's go ahead and start there. You wrote an incredible book called Not Tonight, Honey. And what is that about?
Yeah, so it is about why women actually don't want sex and what we can do about it. It really emerged from me working with women, and in whether it was in a couple situation or just one-on-one. And the two questions that I would get asked the most by them were, what's wrong with me? And am I broken? And I really wanted to address those two questions that just kept coming up in different forms or literally in those two questions, and help women to understand that their low sexual desire isn't their fault, and help them to really explore where that comes from and then what they can do about it.
Obviously, it's not a short answer because you wrote a book on it, but if you had to generalize it, why do some women not have the desire?
Yeah, I think one of the big things is that we have been, as women, culturally conditioned to not be sexual beings. We've really been given this mission in a way to really be the sexual gatekeepers of society. And so we've just accepted that men need sex all of the time. And so it's obviously a woman's job to, regulate and to enforce the moral sexual behavior of society. And just the way that boys are conditioned in terms of their connection with their body, their connection with sex is so different than how girls are raised. And I don't think that men are more sexual than women. I just think that they're conditioned and given more permission to be sexual than women are. And so when you grow up in that environment, and then you're like primed to be these human givers, these individuals who are there for the pleasure and at the disposal of other people, specific men, you just really lose an interest in sexual desire, and you really lose an interest in pursuing pleasure and making and prioritizing it.
Okay, I remember growing up, because I'm in my 30s, and I like what you're saying. I don't know if this is what you're saying, but men were almost glorified the more partners and the more experiences they had sexually, and women, it was the exact opposite.
Absolutely. Yep.
So why is that? Where does that come from?
Yeah, I mean, sex is power in a large sense. And so when men have when an individual has the autonomy to decide for themselves, I'm going to go after something that brings me joy and is pleasurable, and I like have a good time, that gives them a sense of autonomy and a sense of individuality. And that's something that boys and men are just given throughout their whole life. And so the more that society can regulate a woman's body and her sexual behavior, the more in control they are of us. And so I think that that has a lot to do with why boys are promoted to be their sexual selves and girls are really shamed for being the sexual beings that they are, just as much as men are.
I see that, or at least I've heard that there are people having less and less children, or
Mhm.
less and less people are having children now. Do you think that's part of the problem?
Part of what problem?
The part of the problem of women not having the desire to have sex, and also women being shamed for wanting sex?
I think it's really more of a reflection of the growing realities of society. You know, like when I was a kid, most of my mom's friends stayed at home. So you could really survive as a family and do well on a one income household. And that's just not the case nowadays. And so women are delaying, having children because they're working and they're working to pay off student loans and they're working to survive. And so a lot of couples end up postponing having children or reducing the amount of children because they just can't afford to have more than one kid, or they can't afford, or they don't have the family support. I mean, it's multifactorial, but I don't think it's a reflection of women being interested in sex less. I think it's really more of a reflection of the realities of the society that we're in right now.
Okay, I want to get more into relationships, but before we pivot from where we are, how can people get their partners to want to have more sex?
I think that the question that we need to be asking is, why are we having sex? Instead of how can I get you to be, like, how can I entice you to be, like more interested? Like, why do you want to be having sex? And when I ask clients that, it's really interesting, some of the answers that come up, and that allows me to unpack and really take, a figure, or take an expedition in terms of where I need to take them. But for the most part, there's a sense of obligation that, well, I need to be having sex. And so kind of like, well, I need to be working out. So like, how can you motivate me to like go work out? And I think that when we approach sex that way, we're missing like the whole point of it. So I would encourage to think about it differently. Like, why am I having sex? And then what kind of sex is worth having? I think those are the two really important questions that people should be asking themselves.
Yes, definitely. I feel like another thing that could probably come from that would be the partner who wants the sex but isn't getting it might take it internally, and that it's something about them, versus the person who just doesn't have the desire. So I'm wondering, does that, when it comes to relationships, is that something that you see a lot that people struggle with?
Yeah, I think what I see, it's typically is one partner has a higher sexual desire than the other. And there's usually a disconnect on why the higher desire partner doesn't get, like, why don't you just want to have sex more? And it's really, I don't think that when we boil it down, like when I talk to the lower desire partner, it's not that they want less sex. They just want less sex of the sex that they're having. So if they could have better sex, and that better doesn't necessarily mean like with somebody that's more attractive, or like just, hanging from the chandeliers, like anything crazy, but it's warranted to have that discussion of what does better sex mean for you, and what could motivate you, or what could help pull off those brakes that are telling you, no, not tonight. Nope, I don't want to do it. No, I'm not interested. And I see that what a lot of people are trying to do, especially the higher desire partner, is they're trying to push the gas pedal of their partner, and they forget that the brakes are pretty far, they're down pretty good. And so you can throw a bunch of gas and rev those engines, but if your brake is on, you're not going anywhere. And so you have to figure out what is pushing those brakes for the lower desire partner in order for them to start being open to being willing to have more sex.
When you work with people, how do you start that? I mean, what's the first step that they can take?
Yeah, so one of the things that I do is if it's in a couple session or if it's in an individual session, it'll differ a little bit, but recognizing that what's currently functioning is not working because there's dissatisfaction. And so asking, either the current person or the couple, what would be ideal for both of you. And a lot of couples don't even have that conversation. They both just have this like silent expectation of, oh, he probably wants sex every day, or she probably only wants sex like once a month. And then we like tell ourselves these stories and create these narratives about our partners that really aren't probably true. And it could be alleviated, that conflict or that tension or the building resentment could really be alleviated had we just had that basic conversation of how often, and I call it sexpectations, like what are your sexpectations? How often are you desiring to have sex or to be intimate? Why do you want to have sex with me? Like, what is it, just to have an orgasm? Like, okay, so if that's the case, can I just give you a hand job? Can we do oral sex? Is it because you need to feel connected to me? Well, are there other ways that we can feel connected? And a lot of times what I see is usually the lower desire partner needs to feel connected emotionally before they can give themselves physically. And the higher desire partner feels more connected when they are physically, and then they're able to give themselves emotionally. So it becomes this like game where we're chasing things that we can't give each other. And so that's something that we explore during sessions is, okay, how can we get our needs met? Not necessarily just by the other person, but also like from ourselves.
That's so good. And it's like, first off, just communicating what are the needs, and then, okay, how can we get them met? Yeah.
Simple.
Right. It's just that communication block. I feel like a lot of couples are maybe not getting, but I did hear a quote that kind of illustrates what you just said, and you can tell me if this is true or not.
Okay.
Men need to have sex to feel loved, and women need to feel loved to have sex.
Yeah, I'd say that's pretty accurate for the most part. I mean, it's nuanced, but yes, what in my experience is, women need that emotional component in order to feel safe enough to open up. Is this an innate thing where like women are just wired that way? I don't know, because again, if women and boys and girls were raised the same and given those same messages about sexuality and about being sexually active, I'm curious to see if women would also feel connected by having sex and they'd feel loved by having sex versus needing to feel loved in order to have sex.
Why do so many relationships struggle and ultimately fail?
What is the purpose of life? No, that's a great question. Gosh, I think that honestly, relationships fail because of unrealistic and unexpressed expectations. So that I am entering into this relationship and I'm expecting X, Y, Z, Z, all, these 45 different things from you. And realistically, you could probably provide maybe half of them. But modern day relationships, there is such an emphasis on our monogamous partner to provide all of our needs and meet everything. And when they don't, then we get frustrated and resentful and we pull back. And then we stop meeting the needs of our partner because we shut down communication and we start to withhold things that they need and they desire. And then that just chasm, starts to build between the two individuals. And then over time, it just becomes really too big to bridge. And that ultimately can lead to the demise of a relationship.
I've heard before too that it's better not to have expectations. So do you think it's better to just go into a relationship without those, or to go into a relationship and voice those?
I think it depends on the purpose of the relationship. So for, romantic relationships, again, we have this belief, a lot of people, and this is, what we're taught is that you need to find your soulmate and your twin flame or your whatever, and they're going to meet all of your needs and you're going to be attracted to them all of the time and be in love with them all of the time. And as soon as you're not, then they're really not the one for you. And then you need to go, the cycle continues. And so I think that, and what I'm seeing too with, just a big shift away from traditional, gender roles and traditional relationship styles is the ability to create more conscious and intentional relationships. So I'm seeing a lot more open relationships. I'm seeing some sexless, marriages, more like partnerships in a way where people are recognizing, like the traditional marry for love, modern day monogamous relationship is really not working. It's very problematic for a lot of people. And so what they're doing is they are saying, this is what I'm needing from this relationship. And so these are my expectations. Therefore, I will approach it and in hopes of having those needs met. So I don't think that expectations are bad, but I do think it requires a level of self-awareness. And that's where it becomes a problem, is that people don't know what they want. And they think that being in a relationship I'll know what I want when I see it. And I don't think it works that way. I think you really need to know yourself and know what you're wanting at that stage of your life. And then giving yourself permission to say, I'm wanting somebody that meets me where I'm at, or I just want a booty call, or I just want to raise children with somebody. Like there's no right or wrong way to approach a relationship, but being honest with yourself and what you want is absolutely that first step.
You mentioned multiple partners. Can we
Yes.
go into polygamy?
Polygamy or polyamory?
Polyamory.
Okay, sure.
Can we go into polyamory?
We can go into either. Yes, we can absolutely. Yes.
Both, yeah. Well, what is polygamy?
So polygamy is multiple spouses. So
Okay.
it's typically like what you see on like the TLC sister wives, where it's like one guy with like 3 or 4 wives. That's polygamy, means many marriages. And then polyamory just means many loves.
Right. Okay. So I see polyamory becoming more and more popular. I don't know if popular is the right term, but I'm just seeing it more. And I'm wondering, is there just more of like a magnifying glass on it now, or more people are talking about it or sharing about it, or is it actually becoming like this new thing that people are experimenting with?
I think it's yes, all of the above. If that was a multiple choice question, I would say yes, all of the above. I think one, like the presence of social media, that people are able to take magnifying glasses and look at different relationship styles that we can't run away from. People are fascinated by different sexual lifestyles and different relationship arrangements. And so that kind of automatically gives it some titillation and some excitement. So yep, it's going to get more tread. I think especially people in like the millennials and the Gen X and Gen Zers are seeing that traditional monogamy, like the divorce rate, infidelity rates, overall dissatisfaction of, okay, you were married, my parents were married for 50 years and they freaking hated each other. Like that's not a success. Is that really a successful life, a successful relationship?
Right.
And so I think that yeah, is that love? And I think people are starting to like, I want to redefine what life I want to create for myself and what love looks like for me and what a conscious community looks like. And so I think that a lot of people are interested in polyamory or non-monogamy. So non-monogamy is really an umbrella term, and under non-monogamy is different spokes, and polyamory is one of them. Swinging is one of them. Just like having an open relationship is one of them. So it kind of just, but most people, when they hear polyamory, they think all non-monogamy is polyamory, but polyamory is a form of non-monogamy.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I've seen different relationships evolve into polyamory, out of polyamory. What is your opinion on them? Have you worked with people that are and that are not and want to be? Is it successful?
Yeah, so that's an interesting question. Yes, I've worked with people. Personally, I'm polyamorous. So it's something that I'm a big, I wouldn't say I'm a big advocate for. I'm an advocate for it personally and also professionally less so, because I know that can feel overwhelming to some people. And I'm not out there saying, sign up to be polyamorous. Like this is the greatest lifestyle. But I definitely think that it is a valid relationship style for certain people, and it works phenomenally for certain people. And that requires a lot of work, a lot of communication. It can be a lot of work. I don't know how to describe it. So yes, I definitely see it being very non-conformative, non-traditional, but also really valid. So when you ask if it's successful, I would ask the person asking that, like, how would you define monogamy as being successful? Because we look at our divorce rates and we look at our infidelity rates, and like one in two marriages end in divorce. Like over half of them, there's some type of infidelity. Second marriages, the divorce rate's even higher. It's like 60 to 70%. Like, so would you define monogamy as successful? I don't know. I don't think if you're basing it on stats or like long-term partnership, it wouldn't be successable. But if you're looking at it as a relationship style that makes the people in it better individuals, that they are doing it because they are there and present in that relationship because by choice and not obligation, they are there to be better versions of themselves. I think those are ways you can gauge success. Obviously that's, incredibly subjective, but yeah.
I love that answer. And yeah. What's your advice for those who want to communicate their desires to their partner, but they don't know how, or they're scared?
Yeah, that is a totally valid concern. And I think that what a lot of people forget is like, when they're giving advice on this, is they're like, well, just tell them, just like throw it out. But we have this sense of safety inside of us. And it's a real like internal alarm when that sense of safety gets threatened. And so if I know that me telling my partner that I want to open the relationship, or I want to like start using toys, or like I want to have sex more often, if that could possibly threaten the relationship and the stability of it, then everything inside of me is saying, don't do it, shut it down, shut it down. And so if that is the case, I think it's so important that you start by acknowledging that. And it's like, it's not that I'm a chicken and I don't know how to communicate. It's that I'm scared of losing something that's really important to me. And giving yourself that grace and tuning into that fear of saying, okay, this is a normal response to fear the loss of this relationship. Now I need to decide what is more important to me, losing myself in this relationship or possibly losing the relationship. And there's no right answer to that. Only you get to decide. But if you're in a place where you're like, you know what, like I'm brave enough, and that's what happened in my marriage, is that I was like, I can't like continue to be my non-monogamous self in here. Like I have to share with him what my feelings and my desires are, because if not, I felt like I would be betraying myself. And so I was willing to lose my marriage because I knew that I had to be authentic to who I was. It was super freaking scary. Like it wasn't like, some overnight decision, but I knew that I would regret living my life, living a lie, than being who I was truly meant to be. And so I think when we are brave enough to say, okay, how can I communicate? I like to buffer. And this is what I did in my own marriage. I would be like, I was listening to a podcast on non-monogamy, and this is what they were talking about. And so instead of saying, this is what I want, what do you think? And that can be a little bit threatening, using that buffer of, oh, did you hear about Jan and Mike? Like they went to a swingers club the other weekend. Like, what do you think about that? Or, oh, like, Mike and Jay, like they have, like these weekends that they go away together, and that's really helped their sex life where they feel more connected to each other. Or I was reading an article on spicing things up, or whatever desire that you have. Can I send it to you? I would really like to talk, like hear what your thoughts are about it. And I find that approach is so much less threatening than, okay, here, this is what I want to do. Like, tell me your thoughts.
Yes, that feels much safer. That's great advice if you want to go that route. And also this conversation, we're just like shattering my own beliefs left and right, because I'm so interested that you were the one that wanted to go to your marriage and say, hey, I want to open it up to possibly having multiple partners.
Mhm.
And normally, I don't know, can't just be me. I feel like it's the masses that believe that it's usually the man
Mhm.
that wants to open up the relationship.
Yeah. Yes,
Yeah.
it's totally a typical stereotype of that, because like, why would I, a woman, want to have more than one sexual part? Why would I want to have, obviously I'm not putting out enough, so he's the one who would want to open the marriage. And I think that just again goes to like, women aren't seen as sexual beings. We're not seen as someone who crave and desire more sex than maybe their male partner does. Or and we like, I think, to focus on the sex part. People can open their marriage because they want more romance, or they want a travel buddy, or they want to go do like different random things. Yes, are you in non-monogamy? Is sex usually a component? Absolutely. But I think it's funny how we make these assumptions about people in these lifestyles or in these relationship styles when it is so diverse and so contrary to what we probably think it is.
Mm-hmm. Now, would you say that most people in a relationship, they open up the non-monogamy door after they've already tried to have their needs met and that hasn't worked? Or is non-monogamy one of their needs?
That's a great question. I think it can be both. I think that it depends a lot on like how you were raised. And like, I got married at 22 and I had only ever been with my husband. I grew up very religiously. And so the idea of anything besides heterosexual monogamy was not an option. That was, this is the life you will live, and you will have children, and you will be a godly wife and do all of these things. And so I think that had I been who I am now 20 years ago, it could be, that would have been something that I would have said, this is a need of mine, but I didn't know that that was a need until, you're into the marriage for 18 years. So for some people, I've known couples where they both come into the relationship and they both say, non-monogamy is a need of mine. That's just how I'm wired, or this is the relationship style I choose. And that's either work or it's not going to work. I've worked with couples or had friends who, they were together for 10, 20 years and then decided to open the marriage or, date as a couple or whatever it is. So it's so diverse. It really is.
Going back to your point about it being scary because we have this innate response where we just feel fear and it kind of stops us from voicing our wants because we don't want to lose our partner or our relationship. I feel like that's so deeply ingrained in us that it's like it's our security. So ultimately we need to feel that security to survive. So it's like back to like survival instincts.
Yeah.
I'm going to pivot a little bit.
Okay.
There's something that you talk about virginity a little bit, at least that I've seen. And I love the way you articulate this. So I'm going to ask you the question, which is, what's wrong with the question, when did you lose your virginity?
Oh my gosh. Yes. So the concept of virginity is such an antiquated concept of really, again, to regulate a woman's sexual behavior. And this was, again, a way of defining or verifying that a woman had not been soiled or sullied or whatever the words that people would use before she was handed off into a marital whatever. And so when we use that word virginity, we really are evoking that history of how women's sexual behavior was regulated. And so it's so freaking subjective. Like, are we talking like first penetrative? Like, so then like lesbians can't really like have their virginity taken if they've only had sex with other women because there's no penis entering the vagina. Like, it's just problematic because it really perpetuates that idea that a woman's body, her hymen, her, that invisible border, that is only really claimed when that first sexual experience happens. And then suddenly she's no longer a virgin and she is this sexual being. And I just find it so problematic.
Right, right. I completely agree. I have a question. Okay, I'm going to go back to relationships real quick because I wanted to ask you, at what point, if any, can a relationship no longer be revived?
Ooh. When a person no longer cares. So when I would work with couples, I would say, I can absolutely work with hate. You guys hate each other? Awesome. That means I've got something to work with. Because, people think that the opposite of love is hate, but really what I see it's indifference. And so when we get to the point where we're like, I don't really care if
Nothing to fight for?
there's no motivation, there's no drive, there's no connection there. And it doesn't have to be like an ill will. It doesn't have to be like, wow, care what they do, blah, blah, blah. It's much more like, I'm just kind of done trying. Like, I'm just tired and I don't want to make the effort anymore. And I see that so much with women in their 40s, like, holy cow, who have been married for 10 to 15-ish years. And they are just at the point where they are done. They are so indifferent. And it's really a tough thing to work with.
Mm. Yeah. So when you work with people and one person is at that point and one person isn't, is there anything that can be done there? Or it's basically, if one person's there, it's pretty much over.
I think it goes back to, what kind of relationship do you want to have? Because based on, I only have one partner who's wanting romance and sex and like a traditional, like, let's say marriage. And then I have one partner who's like, peace out, I'm done. Like, I'm not interested. Then the next phase is, how can we salvage what we still have? Like, maybe you guys are great business partners. Maybe you're great co-parents. Would you consider staying in a marriage or staying in a relationship or living together, separate rooms? Like, how can we, and this is usually when a family's involved. So usually when kids are involved is when I try to figure out a way, because usually parents are, couples who have kids and their parents, they usually are like, I'm really only here because I'm for the kids. And so it doesn't have to be your 1990s divorce where it's, nasty and dad moves out and then, the kids have to go somewhere every other weekend and whatnot. You can create a family system and structure that works for you. That's another reason why I'm a big fan of non-traditional relationships, is because, you can create and cultivate and design something that, because you have one partner that's like, I'm not attracted to you anymore. I don't want to have sex with you anymore. But man, I really enjoy raising our kids together. And I really enjoy vacationing with you and being friends with you. And so if that other partner who wants a sexual relationship can be okay with that, we can create a family system that still works, and we can figure out a way to have everybody's needs met. But it's going to take some open-mindedness. And because a lot of times people are like, it's monogamy, sex once a week, this is the way it's going to work, or it's nothing else. And I think that the way that the nuclear family currently is, it's not sustainable to have that all or nothing mentality.
Okay, I'm wondering what has to happen to get to that point, and I'll explain what's going on in my mind. I see couples who do get to that point and they, have that separation that's totally, it's not like a heated thing. It's very amicable. And then you have the people who are happily together for decades and just as in love after 30, 40 years as they were in the beginning. And to me, from what I can observe, I feel like we all become different people through our life. Like, we have to shed old identities and we step into new ones. And it's a difference of someone falling in love with you again with this new version of you. And then the other people that look at you and they're like, you're not the same person you were when I married you.
Yeah.
And is that something, like, is that accurate? Do you see that?
Absolutely. I think that we forget that when we get married, that this person has the right to change and to evolve. And I hope that I can help facilitate that change for the better for that person that I'm signing up for in this relationship. Because a lot of times we see, and I see this a lot in monogamous relationships, is this sense of ownership of you're committing to me, now you belong to me, and you do anything to threaten that belonging, you're in the wrong. And I think that that is more of a reflection of how marriage has been historically, of where, you know, like your women are property and children are property. And that's just that mentality versus I want to be in this relationship, whether that's 5 years or 55 years. And I want to help make you a better person. And if the day comes where I don't do that, I want you to go and find somebody else that does. And I think that so many people are not secure enough in themselves to give their partner permission to do that, or to give themselves permission to do that.
Okay, so you think the difference, it comes down to someone being secure in who they are and someone not.
Yeah, I think a lot of it has to do, with security and this idea of like this scarcity mentality. Like, I have to control you. I don't want you to leave me. And so if you change, there's a likelihood that you'll leave me. And that prevents growth, and that prevents change and the opportunity to like really up level your relationship, and it keeps you small. And I would never want that for my husband, where we've had these conversations over the years. If you don't feel like I'm making you a better person, then I'm doing something wrong in this relationship. And if I'm not able to meet your needs, then we need to have a talk about what that looks like and how we can do that. And if not, but we see the divorce or the end of a relationship as a failure. And I think we have to change that outlook on that. Just because a relationship ends doesn't mean it failed. It may have just come to the end of it and gotten everything you possibly could have out of it. That's beautiful. That's not a failure.
I see. Okay, so you're in a relationship, your partner changes, you become scared because you don't recognize a lot of things about your partner now, and maybe this new version, maybe this person doesn't love you like the last one.
Yeah.
But then you also on the other side have divorce, and that looks like failure. So you're between two different fears. You're afraid to put yourself out there, and with this new person you're still your partner, but you don't recognize them as much. And then also you don't want to be a statistic.
Yeah. I think that you can see it as being overwhelming both ways, and you can also see it as being an opportunity for growth both ways. I think there are so many things that you can learn in both scenarios. But yes, if you look at it that way of I'm screwed either way, then you will be screwed either way.
Right. But that's when the communication comes in and the voicing your needs and
absolutely.
Yeah.
And acknowledging like you're changing. I notice that you're changing. And I notice that makes me feel scared, because I'm afraid that if you change, you're not going to want this version of me anymore. And to own that, and to have like, let's talk about that. Yeah, I'm scared too. I'm scared of the partner, this being the partner who's changing. I'm scared that I may not feel the same way about you that I once did now that I have changed. I worked with a couple once who they were both very overweight, and the wife lost, I don't know, like 150 pounds. And they came to me because she was physically she was a different person, but emotionally she was a completely different person. And they just couldn't figure out what do you do with that?
Yeah.
And the issue for her was that I begged him to come on this journey with me, and he didn't want to. And so there was a sense of grief for her, because she could see herself losing that love and losing that connection to the man that she said, I want to do my life with you. But who she was when she signed up for that was not the same woman that came into my office. And I think that that's something that people, like, we have the right to change our minds, and we have the right to grow. And so we want to pick partners that want to support that and choose that over the status quo, and but we're going to stay married, right?
Mm. I think this opens up another layer as well, because it's like, it sounds like she chose herself.
She did, yeah.
Yeah, so it's like we have to either choose ourselves or just basically not choose like if we don't choose ourselves and we're choosing our partner or we're choosing the relationship, then there's going to be resentment there somewhere.
Absolutely. And for so many, especially women that I work with, they never choose themselves. And so they are wondering why they're so unhappy when they're 45, because they've been choosing everybody else and putting everybody else before them. And yet they are burned out, depressed, on multiple medications. They're not sleeping, they're exhausted. And they wonder why, because you never chose you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's so important to put yourself first. Also, going back to, I know that you work with couples and you work with relationships as far as like romantic relationships, but I just want to shed light on the fact that as far as evolving into different versions of yourself, as I'm going through life, obviously everyone experiences this. My close friend also. So it's like we recognize that we can have these conversations, and we just had one a couple of months ago, and I hadn't seen her in probably 6 or 8 months, and I'm like, I know you're basically a new version of yourself, and I can't wait to get to know you again. It's
That's
like
beautiful.
this happens
Yeah.
in every relationship in your life, and even with family too.
Yeah, that's so true. Yes, 100%.
Yeah, so it can be beautiful if you're willing to grow together and not get stuck in your fear.
Yes.
There's another thing that you talk about that I would love to touch on, which is BDSM.
Okay.
It's gotten a lot of attention since 50 Shades of Grey.
Yes.
And so let's talk about the misconception that it has to do with pain and violence.
Yes. Yeah. So I think a lot of people assume that BDSM is like dungeons and whips and flogs and like spikes. And to be fair, yes, that is a part of that, but it is such a broad umbrella, like we talked about with non-monogamy. It is such a broad umbrella that so many different practices, including something as common as spanking, falls under BDSM. And one of the things that I think is so important is that people realize that different kinks, so different things that are considered uncommon, that are sexually arousing for people, that just because it's different doesn't mean it's bad. And to really understand, like, I think that it's when we don't understand something, we fear it. And so when we fear it, we want to create distance. And the easiest way to create distance is to make it kind of like weird and wrong and scary. And so when we associate these like media images, or like things that we saw in 50 Shades or whatever, it's like, oh, that must encompass the entire community and entire practices. And I think that's really unfair. And I'm personally not a part of the BDSM community. I don't, it's not one of my kinks, but I have lots of friends who are, and people I've encountered who are so immersed in that and identify with that community. And the stories and experiences that they have there are, I love hearing about them, because the emphasis on consent and the emphasis on communication is nothing I have seen in any other sexual practice. Like, it is so important to communicate, to set boundaries, to talk about consent. I mean, it is really, really well done when done right. Like, obviously it can go wrong when people aren't, practicing ethically and engaging in sexual behaviors ethically. But for the most part, I really admire how those things are presented in that community.
It's really refreshing to hear you talk about that, because I don't really hear a lot of people talking about BDSM in that way.
Yeah, it's true. Like, you see a lot of like the dominatrixes and the mistresses, and like they've got their paddle and they're ready to like, and again, that is fun for some people. And I am not knocking it and not discounting that part of it. But that can also be really overwhelming and triggering for some people who are like, whoa, that is like way crazy out there. Like, all they want to do is like hurt each other. And it's so much more than that. And so I would encourage, if you're looking for ways to spice your sex life up, or really even curious about it for yourself, because you don't have to be in a relationship to explore BDSM, to really see if there's a kink community near you that's a part of, and go see what it's about.
Yeah, I think BDSM and polyamory could probably be put in the same category as far as needing to be kind of redefined.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I think there's so much fear around anything that's non-traditional vanilla, non-traditional monogamy. And I get it. It's upsetting. You're like, why in the world? I just makes me sad and really, sometimes angry when people like demonize people who are different, or they just completely dismiss. And they're like, nope, that's wrong. Don't want to have a conversation with you. And when we do that, like, we miss out on such rich conversations and connections, even if you don't sign up for it, right? Even if you don't subscribe to that lifestyle, you can still like learn and really think about like, that's interesting. I wonder how I bring in, like what you talked about before, like those assumptions, like, gosh, I wonder how I bring in this assumption in my relationship, or this expectation in my relationship, because I don't see that in polyamory, or I don't see that, situation in BDSM scenes or whatever.
Right? It's like when you see something a certain way, you need to kind of look inward, because it's just a mirror reflecting something that you need to look at in your own life.
Yes, our triggers are our teachers. Absolutely.
Yes. And also when you put someone in a box, like, oh, they're polyamorous, like, I don't want to engage with them. Like, you're actually putting yourself in a box. Exactly. And you're not getting to experience or even understand or entertain any sort of idea outside of your own like limiting beliefs.
Yep, 100%.
I love this conversation.
Me too.
I have one more question for you before I ask it.
Okay.
Is there anything else that you would like to share?
No, I don't think so. This has been wonderful. I'm just excited to discuss all things sexuality.
Okay, so what is your number one health tip? So whether it's mindset, diet and nutrition, physical, emotional, just the one piece of advice you would like everyone to know. Obviously, I can throw sexuality in there for you because it's a different topic.
I would say the first thing that comes to mind is to prioritize pleasure. And that doesn't have to mean sexual pleasure, but like that is something that I see raises everything. So when you prioritize pleasure, you are choosing yourself. You are saying yes to yourself, and you are engaging in activities usually that are nourishing to all elements of you. So that would be my health tip.
I love that. Okay. Where can people find you, Courtney?
Yes. So I'm on most social media stuff at Courtney Boyer Coaching. And you can find me at CourtneyBoyerCoaching.com. And also my book, Not Tonight, Honey, is on Amazon and a lot of other online book retailers as well.
Wonderful. All of that will be in the show notes. And thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you,
everyone, for listening. That concludes this episode. If this resonated with you, please give it a rating and review. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out on Instagram. I would love to hear from you. Links are in the show notes. I sincerely thank you for your time and your presence.